Part 54. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 531. Wanner. But before Lin Yu could say anything, Su Weiner turned her head, glanced at Lin Yu, and then shook her head in the same way. No need to say more, I understand what just happened, and these things were all of my own free will and have nothing to do with you. Something strange flashed in Amelia Sue's eyes. After Lin Yu heard what Su Weiner said, he couldn't help but cough lightly, and then spoke in a deep voice. Indeed, the previous situation was urgent and you were poisoned by a strange poison. Although I don't want to taint your innocence, there is nothing I can do about it. Lin Yu and Su Weiner were looking at each other, and at this moment, Su Weiner climbed directly into Lin Yu's arms. The two of them took care of themselves. At this time, Lin Yu's face suddenly became ugly. His expression condensed, and then he turned his head and looked towards Su Weiner. One glance. The situation seems to be a little bad. When Su Weiner heard Lin Yu say this, she panicked for a moment. What happened? At this time, Lin Yu looked at the land under his feet, and then countless desert gods crawled out of the land under Lin Yu and the others. Lin Yu's eyes flashed a bit of gloom, and the murderous aura in his body was even more stern. He protected Su Weiner behind him. It doesn't matter, they're just desert gods, not worth mentioning. Lin Yu had indeed encountered these desert gods before. He thought that the desert gods could only exist in that desert. But what he never expected was that the desert gods were everywhere. However, this was no wonder. At this moment, those desert gods suddenly appeared in front of Lin Yu. Countless desert gods surrounded Lin Yu, and their eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. Lin Yu's body. At this moment, Lin Yu saw so many desert gods, and after surrounding himself among them, his face was slightly ugly. His expression also twisted slightly, and then he subconsciously took a few steps back. Lin Yu glanced coldly at the god of the desert, with a rather gloomy look in the corners of his eyes and brows, and the murderous aura in his body was even more awe-inspiring. But at this moment, among the desert gods, a man walked out. The man stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes fixed on Lin Yu. His face suddenly turned colder, and the murderous aura on his body became even more intense. It was revealed without any reservation. This man looked quite like a person, but Lin Yu knew that this guy was definitely not a person. The man slowly walked towards Lin Yu, and then he with such a smiling face staring at Lin Yu, the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. Lin Yu's face turned slightly cold, and there was quite a gloomy look in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on that man, and a gloomy murderous intent came from Lin Yu. It was so revealed on his body. I don't know why I dare to ask you, why are you blocking my way? Please give me an explanation. Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly like this, the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and there was quite a bit of mockery in his eyes. At this time, after seeing Lin Yu like this, the desert god king's face turned slightly cold. Are you the one who killed us before? When the desert god king spoke, Lin Yu was also slightly startled, but after a moment, he nodded his head so gently. That's true. I was indeed the one who killed you. Is there any problem with that? Lin Yu stared at the desert god king with a smile on his face. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the desert god king couldn't help but laugh out loud. The murderous aura suddenly emerged. You bastard, you actually dare to touch our people. I think you are just eating the courage of an ambitious leopard. You are tired of living. When Lin Yu saw the furious desert god king, a slight sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then he shook his head. You definitely didn't come here to kill me this time, so what is your purpose? There is no need for everyone to continue to be so hypocritical. Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on the desert god king. At this time, the desert god king was stunned for a moment. He never expected that Lin Yu would say this. After a while, the desert god king suddenly said this. He laughed occasionally. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect it. I really didn't expect that you would be so brave. I really admire you. Lin Yu waved his hand casually, no need to admire me, just tell me your purpose. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, the desert god king couldn't help laughing. His eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and there was a hint of smile at the corner of his mouth. It also suddenly started to become more and more obvious. You are a quick-witted person. If that's the case, I won't hide anything from you. I came to you this time because of the eruption of the volcano in front. In this volcano, there is 1,000-year-old divine grass. I want you to help me get that divine grass out. After hearing what the desert god king said, Lin Yu's mouth corners also curled up a bit of coldness, and his eyes were quite mocking. Interesting, it's really interesting. Then tell me, why do I have to help you? Give me a reason to help you. Lin Yu said slowly. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the desert god king pointed to the tens of thousands of desert gods behind him, and the corners of his mouth curled up a bit of coldness. Isn't it enough to have these? At this time, after hearing what the desert god king said, 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless. At this moment, Lin Yu only thought that this desert god king was a little cute in his stupidity. What if I say it's not enough now? What will you do? Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chang. Chapter 532. Of course, the desert god king was threatening Lin Yu, but he might have made the wrong calculation. At this time, Lin Yu had nothing that he could threaten. At this time, Lin Yu stared at him with a smile on his face. Looking at the desert god king, the coldness at the corners of his mouth suddenly became more and more obvious, and there was a hint of mockery in his eyes. At this moment, after the desert god king heard what Lin Yu said, he stepped straight forward. His eyes were fixed on Lin Yu's body during the first step, and then he spoke with gritted teeth. Boy, if there is a way to heaven, don't take it. If there is no door to hell, you can throw yourself into it. Since you want to die, if I don't help you today, it would really be a bit unjustifiable. After the desert god king finished speaking, he grabbed Lin Yu, and then countless desert gods rushed towards Lin Yu and Su Weiner. But at this moment, the corner of Lin Yu's mouth curled up with just a hint of evil, and the mocking smile in his eyes became more and more obvious. The desert god king in the distance was looking at him. After arriving at this scene, a somewhat dignified look appeared on his face. After waiting for a while, for some unknown reason, an ominous premonition suddenly emerged in the heart of the desert god king. The desert god king half squinted his eyes, with a special color in his eyes. Strange, how could it be like this? At this moment, Lin Yu's thoughts moved, and then the eternal thunder dragon appeared in front of them. When the eternal thunder dragon appeared in front of these desert gods, those desert gods started to move. A pressure from the bloodline emerged in his heart. These desert gods looked at each other like this, and then they looked at each other like this and prepared to run away. But at this time, the coldness in the corner of Lin Yu's mouth suddenly became more and more obvious. There was a hint of ridicule in his eyes, and then he shook his head. Hey, tell me, why are you doing this? You are bringing shame on yourself, asking for trouble. After Lin Yu finished speaking, with a thought in his mind, countless arcs of electricity were scattered from the body of the eternal thunder dragon. In this way, those arcs completely enveloped these desert gods. The mouths of these desert gods emitted there were bursts of screams, and then it turned into charcoal. At this time, Lin Yu just shook his head, and then gently spread his hands. The coldness at the corner of his mouth suddenly became more and more obvious. Tisk, 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 I'm really sorry. I didn't expect you to be so stubborn. Just by playing such a game with you, you became like this. Lin Yu's eyes and brows were full of contempt, and the coldness at the corners of his mouth suddenly became more and more obvious, and his eyes were full of ridicule. After everyone saw this scene, they couldn't help but look at each other like this. You looked at me, I looked at you, a bit of panic flashed in their eyes. At this moment, the Desert God King seemed to be stunned. His eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, his brows seemed to be knitted together, and then he took a few steps back. You, who are you? How could you have such a level of strange beast? It's absolutely impossible, absolutely impossible. The Desert God King's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the look of fear in his eyes made his legs tremble. At this time, Lin Yu stared at the Desert God King with a smile on his face, and then he couldn't help but shake his head. The contempt in the corners of his eyes and brows suddenly began to grow. It's becoming more obvious. And at this moment, the Desert God King seemed to have a flash of inspiration and suddenly remembered something. At this time, he fell to his knees on the ground. It's a villain who has eyesight but doesn't recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive me, sir. I also hope that you can give me a chance to make amends. When Lin Yu heard this, after the Desert God King said this, a hint of mockery flashed through his eyes, and then he raised his brows slightly and raised the corners of his mouth even more. Cold. Interesting, it's really interesting. Then come and tell me, what kind of opportunity do you want to make up for your mistakes? Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on the Desert God King. At this time, the Desert God King's legs kept shaking. After a long while, he gritted his teeth as if he had made up his mind. Generally, I know that there is an ancient ruins around here. There are countless treasures in that ancient ruins of the gods. It is said that it also hides a shocking secret. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what the Desert God King said, he couldn't help but half squinted his eyes, and then he glanced towards the Desert God King, his face slightly condensed, and the corners of his eyes and brows curled up. A few strange colors flashed through it. At this moment, Lin Yu glanced at the Desert God King, and the coldness at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious, and he spoke softly and unhurriedly. Are you telling the truth? If you dare to tell lies to me, I don't think I need to say more. You should also know what the price will be for you. Lin Yu spoke word by word, and the smile on the corner of his mouth suddenly became more and more obvious, and there was a bit of mockery in his eyes. At this moment, the Desert God King seemed to be stunned in place. He nodded his head like a chicken pecking at rice, and his voice trembled slightly. Then he said softly, "Don't worry, sir, don't worry, I will never deceive you no matter who I lie to. This time I am absolutely true, please be careful." The Desert God King couldn't help but tremble violently, and at this time, Lin Yu smiled softly after hearing what the Desert God King said, and then patted the Desert God King on the shoulder and said slowly, "Don't get excited, of course I believe what you said is true, and I just gave you a kind reminder just now, don't take it to heart." At this time, the Desert God King felt like there were 10,000 grass mud horses galloping through his heart. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 533. However, although the Desert God King was very frightened in his heart at this time, he still had to show a smile on his face to avoid making the Plague God angry. Lin Yu glanced towards the Desert God King, and then raised his brows slightly. Interesting, it's really interesting. I have a question that I want to ask you. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, the Desert God King's eyes flashed with something strange. After hearing what Lin Yu said, the Desert God King's face twisted slightly, and then he nodded his head so gently, with a strange color flashing in his eyes. If you have any questions, just ask them all. I will definitely tell you everything I know. After Lin Yu heard what the Desert God King said, the smile at the corner of his mouth suddenly became more and more obvious, and he coughed lightly. How far is it from Sutan town? After hearing what Lin Yu said, the Desert God King's face froze slightly, and then he glanced at Lin Yu, as if he was looking at a monster. It was filled with a sense of panic, and seemed to be full of fear for that small town. Lin Yu felt even more strange when he saw the Desert God King like this. I said, why are you acting like this? After the Desert God King heard what Lin Yu said, he also sighed heavily. There was also a bit of misery in the corner of his mouth, and there was a bit of helplessness in his eyes. Ahem, don't mention it. You don't know that in the small town you were talking about a few days ago, all the people evaporated almost overnight, and the whole town was reduced to ashes. Moreover, in the original Sutan Xiao a black hole actually formed in the sky above the town, and it has not disappeared even now. Now that place has become a forbidden area on Earth. When Lin Yu heard what the Desert God King said, his expression was slightly startled, and then he glanced in the direction of the Desert God King, his brows seeming to be knitted together. Oops, how could it be like this? Is that town really as devastated as you said? At this time, the Desert God King just sighed faintly. Well, the situation may be a little worse than I said. After the commotion was made, we all thought that there must be a heavy treasure born or some kind of peerless miracle. Beast, I just wanted to open my eyes, but I didn't want to wait for all of us to feel it. I only saw that scene, which is simply embarrassing. At this time, Lin Yu frowned slightly. At this time, he also felt a little self-blame in his heart. After all, if he hadn't insisted on fighting Ares, the god of war, maybe the residents of the small town wouldn't be like this now. At this time, Lin Yu's whole person's momentum suddenly began to weaken. And at this moment, the Desert God King seemed to have a flash of inspiration and suddenly remembered something. He turned his head and glanced at Lin Yu, a bit of confusion flashed in his eyes. Meaning? Sir, you don't want to say that this matter has something to do with you? The eyes of the Desert God King were staring straight at Lin Yu, with an expression of complete disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, Lin Yu just sighed, but didn't say anything more. He just walked out. Although Lin Yu didn't say much, he had already answered at this time. After the Desert God King saw Lin Yu like this, there was a look of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, his entire brow seemed to be twisted together, and his eyes were full of disbelief. A moment of misunderstanding. After waiting for a long time, the Desert God King finally calmed down his mood. He just took a deep breath, and then nodded his head so gently. Amazing, indeed amazing. I really admire you, I really admire you. Lin Yu just waved his hand casually, and Su Weiner, who was beside him, could naturally feel the sense of loneliness in Lin Yu. Su Weiner slowly walked to Lin Yu's side, and then just like this gently patting Lin Yu's shoulder, she just smiled. It doesn't matter. In fact, with the character of Ares, the god of war, he only knows how to destroy. Even if you don't provoke him, he might destroy the town. Lin Yu just smiled softly, and then waved his hand casually. It doesn't matter. Everything is over anyway. It's pointless to still worry about what to do. Lin Yu stared at Su Weiner with a smile on his face, and the smile at the corner of his mouth suddenly became more and more obvious. At this time, after Su Weiner heard Lin Yu say this, she nodded her head gently, and then coughed like this. Ahem, not bad, indeed good. The group of people continued to move forward like this. After walking for a while, Lin Yu saw a tall and towering temple in the distance. In this temple, he could clearly feel that there seemed to be an extremely powerful force sealed, and that powerful force was mixed with a bit of evil aura, which was very similar to a certain force he had encountered before. At this time, Lin Yu's face was slightly gloomy, and a bit of solemnity flashed in his eyes. He half closed his eyes, and his brows seemed to be twisted together. How could it be like this? I clearly felt the same aura at the beginning, but now, why can't I remember that kind of power for a moment? What's going on? Lin Yu's face was slightly condensed, and a bit of surprise flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, and his brows seemed to be twisted together. At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, the Desert God King just coughed lightly. I can't go any further forward or I'll lose my mind due to the power inside. The last time I came here, I almost lost my mind. Fortunately, they brought me back in time. Otherwise, I would have become an evil beast. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 534. When Lin Yu heard what the Desert God King said, he suddenly opened his eyes, his pupils suddenly enlarged, and a few meaningful smiles appeared at the corners of his mouth, and then he gently nodded. I remembered, those alien beasts from the evil tribe, those alien beasts from the evil tribe. I said why I felt this power so familiar. It was because of this power and those insects. The power is exactly the same, that's why I feel this way. Lin Yu was talking incoherently like this, and he looked like he was completely crazy. He clenched his fists, and then rushed straight towards the temple. At this time, Lin Yu's voice came. Wan'er, just wait there. I'll go ahead and explore the way first. If there's no problem, I'll call you over. At this time, before Lin Yu could react, Su Weiner appeared beside Lin Yu. 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless for a while. He rolled his eyes at Su Weiner angrily, and then said helplessly, "Why did you come here like this? Why didn't you wait for me to finish?" At this time, Su Weiner was staring at Lin Yu with a smile on her face, and then grabbed Lin Yu's hand. "It doesn't matter. Anyway, if you encounter any danger, then the two of us will bear it together, share the blessings and bear the hardships together. If you really have any shortcomings, it is unlikely that I will live alone by then." Su Weiner gently held Lin Yu's hand, staring directly at Lin Yu, and the smile at the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious. At this moment, after hearing what Su Weiner said, Lin Yu just coughed lightly, and then continued to speak unhurriedly. "Ahem. You silly girl, don't spend the whole day knowing about life and death. You just go to the front to explore the way. Even if there is something dangerous ahead, I will definitely be able to escape." Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Su Weiner, and the corners of his mouth also evoked a few meaningful smiles. At this time, after Su Weiner heard what Lin Yu said, she gently said he stood up on tiptoes, and then gave Lin Yu a gentle peck on the face. "Yes, if you can get away, is it possible that you can still die without saving me?" At this time, Lin Yu was speechless for a while. He just smiled and waved his hands, and then he said no more. At this time, he just glanced in front of him, with the same look on his face. He condensed slightly, and there was a sense of solemnity in the corners of his eyes and brows. After waiting for a while, Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a hint of fire, and then he jumped up directly. At this time, he stood in the void and stared ahead, his eyes burning. His eyes were as bright as fire. At this moment, Lin Yu heard an angry shout, "Back off!" Before Su Weiner had time to react, Lin Yu came directly to Su Weiner's side, facing backwards, and retreated rapidly. After waiting for a while, Lin Yu managed to stabilize his figure. Su Weiner's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu, with a bit of surprise in her eyes. What on earth is going on? At this moment, a ball of pitch-black gas rushed straight away. The ball of ink-colored gas was obviously not coming towards them, which made them sigh in relief. Lin Yu just coughed lightly, then shook his head and smiled. "I don't know, but if I go in and take a look later, I might be able to figure out the clues." But at this moment, when they were still 30 feet away from their temple, a powerful force suddenly hit their side, and then immediately after, Lin Yu and Suwaner both struck at the same time. He was blown away directly by that force. Lin Yu also began to pay attention to this temple at this time. In fact, he originally thought that he had the eternal thunder dragon and the fire unicorn to protect him, and he could go anywhere in the world. But when Lin Yu just felt the invisible barrier after gaining strength, for some reason, he suddenly felt a drop in the ocean. It seems that under that power, he is like an ant, completely worthless. It is a power that makes people unable to resist even the slightest bit, and it is also really terrifying. Lin Yu's face instantly turned pale. After seeing this scene, Suwaner turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. At this time, Suwaner was also worried. Are you okay? This temple is a bit weird, otherwise the two of us should retreat for the time being to avoid its time to get into trouble. Suwaner just whispered in Lin Yu's ear. At this time, after what happened before, Lin Yu also had a desire to retreat, so after thinking for a moment, he also nodded slightly. Okay, now it's better for you to step back and see what's going on here. This temple is weird and very weird. If you go there rashly, you might very well stay there forever. But when Lin Yu finished saying this and was about to retreat, a magnificent palace suddenly appeared in front of Lin Yu. At this time, Suwaner also disappeared. Lin Yu looked around, but still did not find any trace of Suwaner. For a moment, Lin Yu was a little panicked. Oh no, Waner, where are you, Waner? Lin Yu shouted loudly, but at this time there was no sound to answer his question. Lin Yu's whole person instantly fell into an ice cave. Damn it, how could it be like this, damn it. Lin Yu gritted his teeth and said this instantly. At this time, Lin Yu heard a laugh from a distance. Ha ha ha, are you looking for this woman? Then an invisible big hand passed Suwaner and grabbed Suwaner. Suwaner struggled desperately, and her feet kept swinging. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 535. But at this time, Suwaner looked very painful, but could not make any sound. Lin Yu clenched his fists instantly, and said through gritted teeth, You bastard, what on earth do you want to do? Damn it, damn it. But the angrier Lin Yu was, the more painful he felt. Obviously, the happier the guy was, the happier he was. He laughed wildly, his eyes fixed on Lin Yu's body, a wave of mockery. The intention spread from him like this. Ha ha ha, little guy, be angry, let the anger devour you. Anyway, all this has nothing to do with me. I like to see you angry, I like to see you hysterical. Before this time, Lin Yu felt that the monster in front of him seemed to be a bit scary, but now he suddenly realized that the monster in front of him seemed to be even more terrifying and terrifying after he became angry. Although Lin Yu was extremely angry at this time, he was not stupid. What just happened was too unbelievable. Everything was just like this in the flash of lightning. It was indeed somewhat inexplicable. Lin Yu's eyes narrowed to a slit, and then he gently rubbed his chin. A moment later, he suddenly laughed. Ha ha ha, interesting, I understand, everything is just an illusion, whether it is fear, anger, sadness, or any other emotion, that's all you want, you can use it by absorbing these powers, become stronger, I'm right. Obviously, the voice was a little wrong after hearing what Lin Yu said, but after pondering for a moment, the voice spoke in a deep voice. Boy, what you said is true, but even if you know it now, it doesn't matter. Do you really think you can escape from my world of 10,000 laws? That is simply too big. Joke. After the voice said this, there was a burst of laughter. 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead, and he was speechless for a while. He just waved lightly, and then said angrily. Otherwise. Who do you think you are? Can't escape? How is this possible? Lin Yu's voice was unusually cold, and then, with a thought in his mind, Thor's hammer appeared in his palm in an instant. Apparently, the sealed beast was instantly startled after seeing Thor's hammer, and his voice trembled slightly. How is it possible? This Mjolnir should obviously not be in your hands. How did you obtain this Mjolnir? The voice of the sealed beast was unusually cold, and at this moment, Lin Yu jumped directly into the void, and swung an endless wave of thunder and lightning in front of him, almost right here in an instant, it just poured out. The biggest reliance on this alien beast is actually that in his domain, Lin Yu has no way to summon his own alien beast to fight with it and escape from his space, and most beast masters are simply not strong enough. No different from ordinary people, the only difference is that they carry powerful alien beasts, but once the alien beasts cannot be summoned, then they are no different from ordinary people. But Lin Yu was different. Lin Yu was holding Thor's hammer and standing alone in the void. He was like a god who controlled all things in the world, and he had a bit of the demeanor of Zeus, the lord of all evils. After feeling this terrifying power in Lin Yu again, he was no longer as relaxed as before. Today I will give you another chance. If you don't want to die, then I advise you to just surrender. If you insist on resisting, don't blame me. Lin Yu's voice was a little hoarse, but the Lord of all evil spirits seemed to have a trump card. He laughed wildly, ha ha ha, boy, even I have to admit that you are indeed a bit powerful, but don't forget that this in my field, in addition to absorbing your negative power, I can also absorb your positive power. After the Lord of all evils finished speaking, countless tentacles stretched out from the surrounding sky. These tentacles entangled Lin Yu little by little. Lin Yu could clearly feel that the power is passing by bit by bit. Lin Yu wanted to struggle, but the more he struggled, the tighter the tentacles wrapped around him. After this moment, Lin Yu suddenly felt like he was suffocating. At this time, Lin Yu felt vaguely in a trance. But at this moment, in this trance, he seemed to hear a gentle whisper, "You can't fall asleep. If you fall asleep, everything will be over." When Lin Yu heard this voice, he suddenly opened his eyes, and then he released endless thunder and lightning power, and then Lin Yu heard a roar and an angry roar. At this moment, Lin Yu instantly established contact with his strange beast, and he quickly summoned the Eternal Thunder Dragon and the Fire Kylin at the same time. When the Eternal Thunder Dragon and the Fire Kylin stepped into the space, Lin Yu launched an attack directly into the sky without saying a word. Chaos Deo Thunder, Kirin True Fire. The Eternal Thunder Dragon spewed out a lightning column from its mouth, which went straight up into the sky. In just a moment, it seemed to tear the space apart. The Fire Kirin was also unwilling to be outdone. It spewed out a flame towards the void, and then the flame began to burn slowly in the sky. A painful voice sounded, and then the scene around Lin Yu suddenly changed. At this moment, he also saw the true face of this big guy. A monster with countless tentacles and no head on its body, like a ball, suddenly appeared in front of him. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. At this time, Suwanur was also entangled by a tentacle. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 536. Exotic Beast, Lord of All Evils, Level 6 God Level, Level 49. Qualification, Alien, Intermediate. Life, 999999999999777. Speed, 999999999999777. Defense, 999999999999777. Attack, 999999999999777. Skill, unknown. Introduction, living in the desert, the endless temple of Ares absorbs the souls of countless dead souls on the battlefield and turns them into its own power, making it extremely powerful. A moment later, Lin Yu suddenly rushed towards Su Weiner. At this time, Su Weiner seemed to have seen the scene when outsiders were bullying the Tianji sect members. Su Weiner could only watch quietly from the side. She wanted to go up to help, but an invisible barrier blocked her. Got her. At this moment, Su Weiner began to beat the invisible barrier in front of her desperately, but for some reason, at this moment, she had obviously beaten out blood, but the barrier in front of her remained unmoved, and she also can't feel any pain. Su Weiner's fists clenched loudly, and her heart was filled with anger, but her anger could not be vented. After seeing this scene, the Lord of all Evils was also ecstatic. The Lord of all Evil laughed, as if he had gone completely crazy. Ha ha ha, are you very angry? If you are angry, I have a way to help you. I can help you deal with that guy, how about it? Do you need me to help you? The voice of the Lord of all Evils sounded so frequently in Su Weiner's ears. At this time, Su Weiner seemed to be stunned for a moment. After a moment, she whispered softly, "Help me, help me, help me, please help me, please." After hearing what Su Weiner said, the Lord of all Evils was instantly ecstatic. "Okay, of course I can help you, but you also have to promise me something. Whatever you say, as long as you can help me, as long as you can help me, I will promise you anything." At this time, Su Weiner was already a bit hysterical. When the Lord of all Evils heard what Su Weiner said, a vicious thought suddenly rose from his heart, and then he heard his cold voice. Said, "You picked up this sharp blade and saw the enemy in front of you. As long as you stab him in the direction, as long as you kill him, I can help you deal with the remaining wreckage, Yuji sect." Amelia nodded gently, "Okay, I agree." Then Su Weiner slowly walked towards Lin Yu. When Lin Yu saw Su Weiner, he suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He saw Su Weiner being touched by that tentacle. He let go so proactively, and then stumbled towards him with eyes blank. Lin Yu subconsciously took a few steps back. "Weiner, what's wrong with you? Tell me quickly, what's wrong with you? Weiner." But Su Weiner seemed to be completely unable to hear Lin Yu's voice, and she walked towards Lin Yu like a zombie. Lin Yu's expression suddenly darkened, and then his body quickly retreated towards the back. At the end, Lin Yu also stopped in his tracks. "Weiner, tell me quickly, what is going on?" Su Weiner walked towards Lin Yu step by step, but she accidentally fell down. Lin Yu subconsciously wanted to go over and help Su Weiner, and took out the dagger in his hand and aimed it directly at Lin Yu's chest. Stab over. The dagger cut through Lin Yu's chest, but after only being pierced a little, Lin Yu used his spiritual power to protect himself. When Su Weiner saw the blood, she suddenly came back to her senses. Her brows twisted into a Sichuan shape, and then she shook her head crazily, as if she was in great pain. "No, no, that guy is already dead, that guy is already dead, that guy is already dead, that guy is already dead." At this time, Su Weiner seemed to be completely crazy, shaking her head and grabbing her own head desperately, and the dagger in her hand was released. The Lord of all Evils wanted to continue to seduce Su Weiner, but Lin Yu couldn't bear it anymore. He controlled the Eternal Thunder Dragon and the Fire Kylin and attacked towards the Lord of all Evils at the same time. In this reality, it is impossible for the Lord of all Evils to be the opponent of these two god-level beasts. With just one blow, the Lord of all Evils let out a scream, and then his body moved so rapidly. Began to unravel. The Lord of all Evils fell heavily to the ground, and his body began to gradually collapse. At this moment, Lin Yu certainly knew that the Lord of all Evils was very cunning. Although the Lord of all Evils seemed to be at a disadvantage and was in trouble, in fact, this was not the case. Lin Yu's eyes narrowed to a slit, and he suddenly thought that this might be the evil lord's plan to escape. At this moment, under the sand, a humanoid doll only the size of a palm, ordinary things just started to flee quickly. At this time, the Lord of all evils was still here and said fiercely, "This bastard actually destroyed my body. If I don't kill him this time, it will be difficult to eliminate the hatred in my heart. I must destroy every bone in his body, just crush it bit by bit with your own hands." The Lord of all evil just gritted his teeth and spoke hysterically. After the Lord of all evils left, the previously huge body was attacked continuously by the Fire Kylan and the Eternal Thunder Dragon. Without a moment, the huge body was blasted into powder. But at this moment, Lin Yu didn't know why he was always aware of this matter. Maybe something was wrong, but he couldn't quite explain what was wrong. Lin Yu rubbed his chin, and after pondering for a moment, his face suddenly turned cold. "Oh no, this bastard ran away." Fire Kylan and Eternal Thunder Dragon also stopped attacking after hearing what Lin Yu said. At this moment, Suwainer collapsed directly into Lin Yu's arms. At this time, Suwainer's soul was extremely weak, and it seemed that she might die at any time. Lin Yu clenched his fists, and rushed to the mall immediately. He glanced at Arya. "Is there any way you can help me save her?" Arya pondered for a moment, and then took out a document from among the many top-secret documents. "This document should contain what you want. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning." Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 537. Lin Yu was filled with joy and hurriedly came to Arya. "Give me these things quickly, give me these things quickly." But Arya shook her head. "It's not that I don't want to give it to you, but because opening this top-secret file requires 300 million points." Lin Yu was stunned for an instant. "Then how many points do I have now?" Arya shook her head. "It seems that you have done too many tasks to clear your points before, and until now, you don't seem to be doing other tasks, so your points are now 0. Lin Yu felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. "How is it possible? How could it be 0? You must be joking with me, right? You must be joking with me, right?" But Arya's expression at this moment seemed to tell Lin Yu that she was not joking. After just a moment, Lin Yu calmed down. "Tell me, is there any task recently that can quickly increase my points to 300 million? After rummaging for a while, Arya took out a picture. The picture showed a woman. This woman was beautiful, but her body was covered with scars. After Lin Yu saw this picture, he scratched his head and turned around, glancing in Arya's direction. At this moment, they were confused. "Why are you showing me this picture? This is currently the highest task in the task bar. If you complete the task, you will have about 800 million points." Lin Yu was ecstatic when he heard what Arya said. 800 million, right? Okay, then tell me, what exactly is this mission? Arya was a little embarrassed to speak at this moment, and her pretty face was instantly covered with a hint of crimson. At this time, Lin Yu only felt that Arya was a little strange, so his heart couldn't help but skip a beat, but after a moment, he just laughed loudly, and then waved his hands gently. "It doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about anything. If you still have worries, just tell me if you have any questions." Lin Yu spoke unhurriedly. "Acquire the power of nature contained in Artemis' body. Mission reward points are 800 million. Lin Yu was as confused as a 2-foot-tall monk at this moment, and then he glanced in Arya's direction. This mission seems to be nothing. The natural power in Artemis's body, what does it mean? And how to obtain it? At this time, Arya heard Lin Yu. After saying this, she didn't say anything more. She just sent a paragraph of text into Lin Yu's mind. When Lin Yu saw this paragraph of text, he instantly you can now understand why Arya behaved the way she did before. Lin Yu's face was full of helplessness. Well, even if I am willing to do this, others may not agree. Lin Yu shook his head helplessly, and Arya glanced at Lin Yu from the side. As for whether she will agree to it, I'm not sure, but if you don't complete this task, the points for other tasks will be very few, only about 3 to 5 million. In that case, if you want to collect these 3 with 100 million points, I am afraid that even if I can gather them together, it will still be too late to save Miss Su. Arya said softly. After waiting for a while, Lin Yu clenched his fists, and then he seemed to have made such a big decision. Okay, let's fight. This time it's for treatment, Wanner. But based on Wanner's current situation, I think Wanner may not be able to hold on. If this continues, Wanner may die. After a moment, Arya seemed to hear something. What you said is indeed true, so you can put her in your sea of consciousness and use the power of your soul to continuously transmit energy to Miss Wanner. In that case, Miss Wanner can probably still persist. Nearly half a year. Lin Yu nodded, and finally he looked towards Arya as if he had remembered something. By the way, do you know where this goddess of nature is now? Arya smiled, and then pointed in front of Lin Yu. Coincidentally, this is the temple of the goddess of nature. The goddess of nature, Artemis, and the god of war, Ares, had a conflict for some unknown reason, so the god of war, Ares, found the soul witch. At the expense of the divine power of his left arm, he exchanged for a bottle of witch potion. After he tricked Artemis into drinking it, Artemis could not sleep for a long time. In the end, he was sealed in the goddess of nature. In the temple. Lin Yu never expected that the legendary god of war Ares would be so despicable, but then he remembered the scene when he met Ares, the god of war, and he felt a little relieved at this moment. Well, it seems that this time we have to go to the temple of the goddess of nature to see what's going on. Then I wish you good luck, master. Lin Yu smiled. Well, maybe, but I can't tell what the situation is now. I just hope that everything is fine. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he left the mall directly. He glanced at Su Weiner, who was lying on the ground with a pale face, and couldn't help but feel a little distressed in his heart. He gently kissed Su Weiner on the forehead, and then he said so softly. Silly girl, don't worry, I will definitely save you, don't worry, I swear. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he immediately moved his mind, and a soft light directly enveloped Su Weiner, and then Su Weiner disappeared between Lin Yu's eyebrows. After doing all this, Lin Yu took a firm step and walked towards the temple of the goddess of nature. A figure in a black robe in the distance saw the scene and his face was instantly ecstatic. At this time, a hoarse voice was heard in the distance. Little guy, I wish you good luck in advance this time. I hope your luck can be as good as before. After the black-robed man finished speaking, he disappeared directly on the spot. When Lin Yu stepped into the temple of the goddess of nature, Ares, the god of war at the bottom of the earth in the distance, opened his eyes instantly. Ares's face instantly became gloomy, and then he clenched his fists. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 538. When Oceanus and Aphrodite saw Ares, they clenched their fists and exuded a sense of anger. Their eyes were also full of confusion. Meaning. I said, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Why are you suddenly like this? Oceanus said with confusion. Ares, the god of war, glanced at Oceanus casually, and then said in a deep voice, someone broke into the temple of the nature goddess Artemis. It seems that the witch's prophecy turned out to be true. I didn't expect someone to actually break in. Ares just said this with almost gritted teeth, his fists clenched loudly, and the murderous aura in his body gradually spread like this. The temperature around him seemed to be even at this moment. It has dropped several degrees. Oceanus's face turned cold. Of course she could feel the changes in the mood of Ares, the god of war, so she started to give verbal reminders. I advise you to calm down. Don't forget what we are doing now. If this thing fails because of your lack of calmness, I think you should know what kind of sacrifice you will make. Cost. Oceanus just said this, almost gritting his teeth. Even though Ares, the god of war, was unwilling to do so, he had to admit that what Oceanus said was indeed true. I know what you said, and I also know that you won't act out of emotion. Just keep this matter in your heart, Miss Oceanus. Ares, the god of war, almost said through gritted teeth. Oceanus' face darkened. It's good that you know, if your plan to resurrect Gaia fails this time, you will die by then. I said so. Ares, the god of war, continued to focus his mind like this, and then he started to move his power crazily towards the coffin of the earth, and the coffin of the earth was like a greedy giant beast. He was absorbing the divine power of the three of them tirelessly. At this time, the faces of the three of them became paler. Ares, the god of war, stared at Oceanus with his eyes fixed on him, and the murderous aura in his body began to spread. Oceanus, you'd better explain to me clearly, what is going on? Why is it like this? Didn't you say that the three of us have enough power to resurrect Gaia, the mother of the earth? But now it seems that Gaia, the mother of the earth, has no intention of waking up. Ares, the god of war, said in a cold voice, with a kind of coldness all over his body. Oceanus was also a little angry. She stared directly at Ares, the god of war, and let out a cry. An angry roar. Ares, god of war, I don't know what is going on, but you'd better not challenge my majesty, otherwise I may not be able to do other things, but there will be no problem in killing you. Confidence, strong self-confidence. After Oceanus said this, Ares, the god of war, although he was unwilling to do so, did not dare to say anything more. He just turned his head to the side and tightened his grip. Fist, clenched the crown of his teeth. After waiting for a while, Oceanus seemed to have remembered something, and his face sank slightly. Oh no, Gaia, the mother of the earth, may have been planted with a trace of divine power by Zeus. Everything we have done they have all been noticed by Zeus. Oceanus said helplessly. After hearing what Oceanus said, Ares, the god of war, turned so ugly instantly. What are you talking about? You crazy woman, if what we have done is known to Zeus, it is absolutely impossible for Zeus to let us go with his character. Do you know that because of you, crazy woman, everyone is with you? Have we fallen into this catastrophe together? Oceanus glared coldly at Ares, the god of war, and the chill in his body rose to the sky, and then he heard her gnashing her teeth. Ares, god of war, if you want to leave now, I will definitely not stop you. You can get out now. If you don't want to get out now and want to continue, then you'd better shut up. Aphrodite, who had been silent, just pondered for a moment and then sighed quietly. Oh, stop arguing. Even with the divine power of Zeus, that guy Euloouju's godhead is being inherited by ordinary people outside. Whether he can awaken or not is two different things, so the two of you are also no need for such arguments. Aphrodite said softly. Oceanus and the god of war Ares heard it, and Aphrodite breathed a sigh of relief after saying this. Well, it's best to be like what you said. Then we may still have a slight chance of winning. If this matter is really known, then we will definitely fall into this irreversible situation. By then I'm afraid there will be no chance of winning. Ares, the god of war, said worriedly. After all, he knew this old guy Zeus very well. This old guy Zeus was extremely terrifying and very calculating. Even if he died, no one would dare to underestimate him. Old guy, after all, Zeus, who is known as the king of gods, cannot be that ordinary person. At this moment, all the people felt that their power was being madly extracted by the earth coffin. The faces of the three of them suddenly became ugly. At this moment, the three of them wanted to quickly cut off their power from the earth coffin. But the more they wanted to take back their power, the more madly the great emperor coffin absorbed their power. They simply had no way to cut off their power from the earth coffin on their own. After a moment, the faces of the three of them suddenly turned pale, and then a mouthful of blood spurted out directly. The three of them were stunned in an instant, and their faces became more and more ugly. At this time, they felt that the earth coffin was shaking violently and emitting a dark yellow light. The light began to quickly become dazzling. Then a powerful force broke out from the great emperor's coffin. At this moment, after the three of them felt this power, their souls couldn't help but tremble. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 539. Then, the three of them were knocked away by a divine force, and then fell heavily to the ground. A mouthful of blood spurted out, and their faces instantly turned pale. But at this time, Oceanus's face became more and more excited, and her whole body almost seemed to be trembling, and then she slowly walked forward, and then she just walked forward so directly. Zi knelt on the ground, with a certain piety in his eyes. Oceanus, pay homage to Mother Earth. Mother Earth has finally awakened. May Mother Earth lead us to conquer the world together. At this time, the coffin of the earth exploded instantly, and a powerful impact exploded the entire center of the earth. The lava in the ground splashed, and a burning feeling enveloped everyone's hearts. The people looked at each other, their hearts trembling. Then a woman walked out slowly. A sense of desolation flashed in the woman's eyes, as if she were a king looking down on everything in the world, giving people an extremely shocking feeling. At this time, the eyes of Ares and Aphrodite, the god of war, were staring directly at Gaia, and Ares, the god of war, took a step forward. Gaia, we saved you, why do you do this to us? The words of Ares, the god of war, were quite gloomy and cold. At this time, Gaia, after hearing what Ares said, just turned her head and looked towards Ares, the god of war, coldly. He glanced at it, his eyes filled with a sense of endless desolation. You seem to be unconvinced. There was no emotion in Gaia's voice, and then the god of war Ares instantly felt like he was being grabbed by a pair of invisible hands by his throat. He began to struggle desperately, but only after struggling for a moment. And then realized that it was in vain. At this time, Gaia stared at Ares, the god of war, with a smile on her face. Ares, although even I have to admit that you do have some ability, but among the ancient gods, I'm afraid you, the god of war, are the most unworthy of the name. I think you should understand the reason why I say this. The earth goddess Gaia just said this unhurriedly, and the sneer at the corner of her mouth gradually began to appear from the corner of her mouth. After seeing this scene, Ares, the god of war, was naturally extremely angry. He clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and stared at the earth goddess Gaia. A cold aura came from him, began to spread on his body. Gaia, what do you mean by this? Please explain it to me clearly. The earth goddess Gaia threw him to the stone wall beside him like trash, and then she gently grabbed him to control Ares, the god of war, and grabbed him to another wall, and so on. After a while, the Kung Fu war god Ares was already bruised and swollen. At this time, the earth goddess Gaia suddenly laughed like this, are you still asking me the reason for this? There is no other reason. It's just because you are a waste and lack of strength. You are such a waste. I really don't know Zeus. What on earth did that guy think that he chose you to be the god of war? After the earth goddess Gaia finished speaking, she threw the god of war Ares into the air, and then the god of war Ares fell heavily to the ground in an instant. At this moment, Ares, the god of war, was filled with a kind of anger, and at this time he was even more unwilling. Gaia, just wait for me. If my strength hadn't been sealed, which is close to 50%, would you have any sense now? The god of war Ares was naturally full of unwillingness at this moment, and at this time Gaia just glanced contemptuously at the god of war Ares. Did you think that only 50% of your strength was sealed away? Little did you know that I was sealed away, nearly 70% of my strength. 70% of my strength was sealed in 7 different beasts. That damn bastard, you scattered those alien beasts all over the world, and even now I don't know how to get those powers back. Gaia got angrier and angrier as she talked, and in the end, she threw Ares, the god of war, to the side and flew away so hard. Ares, the god of war, fell heavily to the ground, and then got up with difficulty. He was full of unwillingness, but in the face of absolute strength, he was also very helpless, so now, even if he has broken teeth, it also has to be swallowed into the stomach. Aphrodite on the side looked at everything happening in front of her as if she was watching a play. After Gaia saw Aphrodite, she just smiled and walked towards Aphrodite, as expected of this beautiful god. Even a woman like me was a little moved when she saw it. After hearing what Gaia said, Aphrodite just smiled casually, giggle, it's a joke, it's a joke. At this moment, Lin Yu stepped directly into a temple. When Lin Yu stepped into the temple, for some reason, he suddenly felt a bit of an ominous premonition in his heart. He looked around and looked slightly surprised. Why does this temple feel so eerie? For some reason, Lin Yu always felt like there was a pair of eyes staring directly at him from behind him, but when he turned his head, he found nothing. Lin Yu seemed to be stunned, and his brows seemed to be squeezed together. At this moment, after Lin Yu stabilized his body slightly, he felt a very special force coming towards him. After seeing this force, Lin Yu jumped up without saying a word, but at this time, Lin Yu found that even if he jumped up, the force seemed to lock on him, and it turned around and hit him. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu flew up and down, moved left and right, and there was a burst of chaos in the temple. After a while, Lin Yu took out Thor's hammer and swung it. The force that had been chasing him hit him heavily, and Lin Yu was directly shaken away and fell heavily to the ground. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji-Sheng Chang. Chapter 540. At this time, Lin Yu also discovered that there was something wrong with the temple, but he couldn't tell exactly what was wrong. At this time, he just looked around. In fact, this temple doesn't look like anything special. This temple was built very tall, but after years of hard work, it became somewhat mottled. In the temple, a throne was vaguely visible in the middle. The throne was covered with cobwebs. Lin Yu slowly took a few steps forward. He wanted to see if there was anything on the throne. What a clue! But for some reason, when he just took a step forward, he was blocked by an invisible barrier. Lin Yu thought for a moment and shook his head slightly. It's weird, it's just too weird. What are these spatial barriers going on? Lin Yu just muttered in a low voice. Lin Yu's mind moved, and then he summoned the space-time beast like this. Time and space beast, what is going on? Do you know what is going on with this space barrier? Chronoman has a very deep understanding of time and space, but even Chronoman, who has a deep understanding of time and space, is completely confused after seeing the scene in front of him. The space-time beast shook its huge head, and then said in a deep voice, I don't know exactly what is going on. I just feel that there is something strange around here. These space barriers don't seem to be pure space barriers. Anyway, it feels like someone has arranged it this way on purpose. After the space-time beast said this, it seemed as if he suddenly discovered something. I remembered that this is a superimposed space. In other words, these things you see now are actually not here at all. In one space, it can only be seen because the space barrier in that space is damaged. Lin Yu was still a little confused. The space-time beast hurriedly explained to Lin Yu, actually, This can be understood as two boxes. Each of these two boxes has a hole, and the two holes happen to overlap, so no matter you threw the small hole in any box, you can see part of the other box. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly realized, so that's it? If that's the case, then I should be able to go through directly, but why can't I go through? Space is not as simple as you think. Although you can see the scene in front of you, there are connections in different dimensions between them, so if you want to find what you see, we must use the power of time and space. The time and space beast talked for a long time, and Lin Yu couldn't understand it at all. At this time, the time and space beast was facing Lin Yu, as if he was playing the piano to a cow, and it had no effect at all. However, after listening to the time and space beast's explanation, Lin Yu roughly understood one thing, that is, this time and space beast might have a way to bring him there. In that case, you possess the power of time and space, and you have analyzed this matter so thoroughly, can you take me there? But what Lin Yu never expected was that the space-time beast would shake his head directly, and then answer categorically, no. 3 black lines appeared on Lin Yu's forehead. Then can you explain to me now, why can't you? Of course it's because that space is no longer our space. The power of space and time in it may be the same as ours, or it may be different in this space. And I can't feel the power of space and time in that space, as well as the laws of space and time. So this means that the laws of time and space in that space have been re-established, so I can't take you there with me. Lin Yu also felt disappointed at this moment. Then if that's the case, what should I do now? The space-time beast pondered, and after thinking for a moment, he whispered, maybe you can try it and find the answer in this space. What kind of answer? The space-time beast shook his head, I don't know exactly what the answer is. Maybe you will know it once you find it. The space-time beast glanced at Lin Yu, and Lin Yu also glanced at the space-time beast. The two people looked at each other with complicated expressions. But after Lin Yu looked around for a long time, he couldn't see any clues. In the end, even Lin Yu wanted to give up. At this moment, a vague and strange power fluctuation in the distance began to appear. That strange power fluctuation made Lin Yu's mind condense and his face became happy. I think I found it. After hearing Lin Yu's words, the space-time beast quickly flew to Lin Yu's side, and then glanced at Lin Yu. Did you find it? Where? Lin Yu pointed to his right front. There was nothing in front of him. The space-time beast began to feel it carefully. After a while, his heart suddenly became ecstatic. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that you would actually be able to find it. This is really something I didn't expect. Lin Yu also looked proud, ha ha ha, that's right, don't even look at what this young master is like, he is extremely talented. Time and Space Beast. The two of them walked slowly forward, talking and laughing. After walking for a while, Lin Yu stopped. For some reason, they were not far away from that place, but no matter how they moved forward, they could not get close to it. And when they got close to it, they always felt that there was a strong force, pushing them out as if it was deliberately blocking them. Lin Yu stopped, and his face was a little ugly. The Time and Space Beast also stopped, and his face was also a little ugly. The two looked at each other, and their eyebrows seemed to be twisted together. What should I do now? I'm afraid it's a headache. Lin Yu touched his chin, and then he pondered for a moment, I'm afraid someone is deliberately making trouble. It looks a little headache now, but there's no need to be afraid. As the saying goes, when the enemy comes, the general will stop, and when the water comes, the earth will cover it.